Hello, welcome to Flooring Models Kit Review Time. Today we're looking at airbrushes. Now airbrushes are one of those things, they're very much a personal choice. Lots of things in this hobby you can have personal choices with. Some of them you can just get away with using pretty much anything. Scribing tools, definitely one of them. Sanders, definitely another. Choices of paint, but mainly the big sticking one is always going to be your airbrush. Now the things with airbrushes is you can go cheap, and let's face it, thanks to China and eBay and various online places like that, you can pick up actually a very good airbrush for relatively little money. The only drawback with those things is that, like everything in life, you do pay for what you get. So obviously you spend a little bit more money, you're going to have a little bit more perhaps for quality item, perhaps some of the parts will last quicker and all the rest of it. If you're quite happy to keep just chipping along and every now and again spend £30, something else like that, on a new airbrush, you can go along quite happily through life. But sometimes perhaps you just want to upgrade, and also there's little things on airbrushes that can make your life a little bit easier, certainly from a point of air pressure, trigger control and stuff like that, which is very much important for our type of the hobby. The other big thing is price. There's a vastness in price. Really, you can go anything from around about sort of £30, we're saying, for the cheap ones. The mid-range ones, I would say you're paying anything from 60 to 100. Okay, and then you can go up in tier. So the next tier up, I'd be saying you're going to be spending anything from 100 to 200, and then you're into what I call the heavy-duty airbrushes of this world, which tend to be sort of the 200 to 300 and then up. Because again, like everything, you can pay an absolute fortune for airbrushes. So down in front of us, we've got a new boy in town, which is this particular one here, and my other selection. Now I am a little bit of an airbrush hoarder, as a lot of you know. I do have quite a few in different selections. You know, just for complete transparency, I like the Harder and Steenbeck range. I've been championing these airbrushes now for the last 15 years, but I don't think they're the best either. You know, and this is what often surprises a lot of people, because they'll turn around to me and say, but if you love them, why do you use them if they're not the best? But like women in life, I would say sometimes it's easier to live with one than it actually is just to have something extremely good, because it can be a little bit of high maintenance to work with. Harder and Steenbeck fit that sweet spot for me, because generally they're easy to clean, they're easy to use, and getting replacement parts, things like that, is just a drop-in 2-minute job to put them in the actual airbrush. So from that point of view, that's why I like working with them, and I do pretty much own all of them. Okay, but that said, Iwata airbrushes for me are still just that little bit nicer. They spray beautifully, the control, the actual feel of the airbrush and everything else like that, I think is a higher point to the actual Harder and Steenbecks, but just from a maintenance point of view, cleaning them out, keeping them going and all stuff like that, especially with acrylics, I just find them a little bit more hard work than it is running day to day with something like an Evo or an Infinity airbrush from Harder and Steenbeck. But like everything, I'm always on the lookout for an airbrush that sort of, you know, fits the sweet spot, is generally at the right price, but perhaps has a fantastic spray performance and all the rest of it. And that is where this thing has come in. Now, this one's been brought to my attention by a lot of the members on the Flooring Model site who's been raving about this one. So really, it's the GSI Mr. Hobby's range of airbrushes. Now, they've got quite a few in the range, and they basically start from around about, let me just bring my little sheet up here of all the different ones I did have. There we go. So we're basically starting, if you wanted to, at their sort of lower end airbrushes for around about the £100, I would say. That's going to get you a double action one with all the bits and pieces in there and stuff like that. Okay, so that is the what they call the Procon Boy FWA double action airbrush with a 0.2 nozzle and all the rest of it. It's going to cost you around about £100. I know that obviously a lot of people can say, oh, I can get it cheaper. This is just, I'm going for a general type of price, okay, and things like that. All right, then obviously this particular one here is just £120. Okay, so you're thinking this seems to have all the good parts of it, as we'll see in a moment, and at a reasonable price. And that's what's really pricked my ears up onto this one, because it feels very heavy, it feels solid, it's in a good case, it seems to have all the bells and whistles on this one. So I thought that's why we'd have a look at this particular airbrush to see what it's like. So if we just move these out of the way, you'll be greeted by a lovely little box just like this. Okay, so this one's basically stating it's got the 0.2 needle set in that. For my point of view of spraying, predominantly lacquers, if I'm honest, but I do spray a lot of acrylics. I spray usual thing like Tamiya, Guns, Vallejo, stuff like that. I think the 0.2 is my sweet spot. I know a lot of people prefer the 0.3. Certainly in my iWater, I've got down here, I've got a couple of them anyway, but this is HPCS. That one is the 0.3. That works beautifully with any paints. I think if you're in the range of 0.2 to 0.4, anything from there, you'll be absolutely fine. 0.15, I think, is a little bit too small, especially for acrylics. Lacquers, stuff like that, very heavily thin paints, no problem at all, but that's a tight nozzle, okay? And you can always have problems with clogging, spitting, just stopping generally and stuff like that. So looking around on the box, we can see some of the bits we actually get down here. So we get an airbrush, we get a different type of connector for the air on the bottom, we get a little spanner, looks like we've got a reg off the bottom as well, and you get an air hose. Okay, we've got a little bit down in here. Obviously it is all in the old Japanese, so we can sort of bear with us on this one. Okay, so if you can read it, there you go, that will be down in there. A couple of other bits that they do, so we're thinking down in here, it's various regulators and traps, and really that is it. So in the box, like I said before, it is a very nice box. We do get we've got a little leaflet talking about obviously paint mixes, cleaning stations, bubbling and things like that, which, to be honest, if you've ever wondered about all of these, just have a look at the Flooring Models site, you'll see all about it. Talks about what I say is never submerge them in full thinners, because they don't particularly like that, just cleaning them normally. Okay, and then obviously a little bit how an airbrush works, which this is nice, is because I'm trying to explain this all the time to people, but basically it's talking about where the paint comes from and where the air comes from. Okay, and how an airbrush works, about loosening and tightening off, how the rear assembly works, obviously stripping it down, various things, making up stuff, as you might imagine. And then in here, and I know it's all in Japanese, but pretty much it's straightforward on how to understand how it works. Another one is here, again, good point about the actual paint build-up in the actual nozzle area and the troubles that can cause and how that happens and how to rectify it, i.e. the needle not being seated further enough forward and things like that. So that's quite a handy little tool. Hopefully we've got a breakdown in the parts, which we do. Talking about there, so it just basically gives you the little various things in there talking about that one, and we've got all the parts down in there, which is pretty much what we'd expect. And again, another comprehensive area. So this one down in here, as we know, is like the regulator, which we'll look at is for basically spray can work. Obviously we won't worry about that. Talking about obviously using the airbrush, how to use a double action airbrush, spray patterns and what to be looking for. And again, if you've ever wanted to know any of these things, hit us up here at Flooring Models, because we've got full free tutorials on airbrushing, which are all done live. Okay, so back to it. So what have we got down in here? We have a very nice case. Okay, so we have our airbrush, which is fair enough, pretty much what we'd expect. That's actually very nice. It's got a good weight to it. It feels very solid. It feels quite, you know, a good quality product at the end of the day. Okay, now you're probably looking at it thinking that doesn't half look very much like that. And I don't think you're going to be surprised at all by thinking there's a very good reason to it, that there is a lot of joints between the two. Okay, the weight of them, the feel of them, the metal of them, you know, the design is obviously going to be different, but generally there's a lot of similarities between the two, and that's why these have been known now as really the cheap version of iWater. Okay, so this is basically for regulating your air can. So if you've got a can of air, you screw this in the top, you've got an air hose that will come on here, and then that way you can actually screw up and down for your actual amount of air coming out the tank. So if you think it's like a regulator for using a can, not a fan, I must admit. We've got a little tool. So we've got a little tool for getting in the inside, for getting in there and things like that. And also we do get, which is a nice touch, because a lot of the times you get home and you haven't got a hose. You have got a hose, but to be honest, it's a tiny little hose. Okay, so that's not going to be much use to anyone. All right, so back to the airbrush. Usual thing, we've got a protective cap, and then down on here you can see we've got a very nice castle or crown type needle guard protector. Okay, down in there. That needle is just inside there. Hopefully you can just about see it in there. It is very small. Okay, for people who obviously follow me a lot, you probably don't know what this is. This is a built-in MAC valve. So this is for adjustment of the air as it comes through, because a lot of, you know, obviously the air comes in up here. The trigger regulates how much air comes through. There's a channel that comes down the side of the actual airbrush itself, down the side of the needle, completely away from it, normally on the bottom if we're honest, okay, or it's usually to one side. And then this is a simple screw which is going to tell how much air can get out into this forward area. Then obviously it goes on to the actual around the nozzle, so it circles around the outside of the nozzles, causes a vacuum which draws the paint down then, and then obviously along the needle it gets atomized and then onto your model. Okay, so that's that part. Down in here we got the trigger, which is a simple crown type trigger, and again that has got very nice pull, and again it's very nice and smooth on the depression. It's not like it's clunky, it's like, you know, in steps. That's actually got one, so you can regulate your air, but again pulling back, that's a very long travel as well. It's got a beautiful travel, and that's what we often say about Iwata airbrushes compared to Harder and Steenbeck. The Harder and Steenbeck travel, certainly on the cheaper ranges, it's right over here, is a lot less. Now obviously I've got mine locked, so that would help, but again the pull and the travel, I must admit, there's a few little features, and that's what you pay for, is obviously you can tighten up the travel, and I have mine set to a certain way because that's the way I like to spray. And again, but these, you always get a longer pull of the travel, which is quite nice, which gives you technically more control. Okay, moving down the back end, we've got down in here, we've actually got a lock, so we can, if we go all the way forward, you'll notice the trigger hardly moves, and as we unscrew this, you can see how we've got a little bit here now travel, and if we do it a lot more, you can see we get the full. So what you can actually do is lock this in the back. Again, it doesn't have a quick release like you might find on one of these. This has a button, I can lock it, that does it. To take it off, I unclick it, we're good to go, and then I click it in again, and we're back to where we were before. So you can set exactly what pressure you want, and then you can take it on and off. So if suddenly you want to blow out your airbrush and clean it through, you can drag it back. Obviously that one doesn't, this one does not. Okay, but that's pretty much standard of any of the silver line versions of the actual airbrush. But again, when you're thinking of the price we're paying well over £100 less for this airbrush. So again, but that's nice, it's got very nice smooth travel and all the rest of it. Moving down the front, we've actually got a quick release system, so you can put in any form of one of these. So if I just whip one of these off a minute. So down in here I've got a quick disconnect adapter, okay, and that now can screw in the bottom and we're good to go. But if you've got a different one, obviously for the can, or if you wanted to use this air hose, you know, then obviously you could just screw this one onto here and you're good to go. So it just depends on what size one you want to go for. Again, because I always use quick disconnectors and things like that, we can put it in there. The colour cut is I've got to remember which one it is now. I've got my little crib sheet up here. Where are we? Okay, so the colour cut on the top here is a 10mm. It is solid, you can't change it out like you can with some of the other manufacturers. Okay, some of the other ones you can actually just take the colour cut off, and you can put in a small one, a tiny one, or you can put a massive one on. So unfortunately you are stuck with that, but to be honest that's exactly the same setup as what we find down here on the Iwata airbrushes, and I'm just wondering, it is, funnily enough, exactly the same lid and colour cut style in here, but obviously we've got a little bit of ribbing, okay, on there. But again, good clean area, nice, easy to get down to clean out the needle and all the gubbins down at the front end and everything else like that, so that's another really nice touch with it. Again, looks like it's all anodized as well on that cup lid, which is quite nice because it doesn't blind the camera like other ones do. Okay, so pulling it apart, usual thing, we're going to unscrew the back. Again, that feels a little bit cheap, shall we say. That feels not as nice as perhaps undoing Iwata airbrushes and stuff like that. So down in here we've got the usual setup, so we've got the little chuck on the back, or the collet, and then that is how you take the needle out. So you can take the needle, and again the needle looks quite nice, it's pointy at one end. Not a lot really you can say about needles, but that seems very nicely manufactured. There's no marking or anything down the back end as well to tell you what size needle it is, so just be careful you don't get mixed up with other sizes and stuff like that. Okay, then if we just move around to the front end, we hopefully can take off the guard. So that's the needle guard off the front, which is this little castle one. Then we should be able to come in here to the nozzle. So that's our nozzle in here, and again we would need our little tool to get it off, and this is my only drawback with these things, because if you go the wrong way you can in fact take that nozzle off, and then when you compare it in size, this is what we're on about of working. If you get something in there and you need to clean that out, that is the size you're dealing with, as opposed to that's one from a harder and steam bit. Okay, so as you can see, it's just personal choice, and that's why I like working with other airbrushes. That's not to say, as I say, it's the best, as I pointed out. It's just what I like to use. Okay, and then obviously you can go back into the back end here and remove this end off, and then you would see the air section and all the rest of it. But that is roughly it. Now, I know there's a lot of talk about people when they say about taking the nozzle off, it doesn't technically need to come off, and so forth and so on. But sometimes for that little extra bit of clean work and all the things like that, you have to. And obviously from a maintenance point of view, I'll get this thing back on, that's why it's so tight, that's why I don't like playing with these. You can, don't over tighten it, okay, but you can literally take the back end off, take the whole point off and everything else. But if you split the nozzle or anything else like that, that is the bit you're going to need to replace on there, just like that. Okay, then we got the little guard goes back on. And then we've got the crown system, and just because we're trying to keep this all open, there is other options out there, like for this one down in here, you can obviously exactly the same. We've got the forward guard, and then we've got the nozzle one and all the rest of it, but this little particular one as well has got a floating nozzle system. Okay, so you still got the tiny nozzle at the end, but you got another one, but it's called a floating one because it literally just sits on the end here. You won't force that. Okay, let's just take that back, and again you can probably see how it sits on. It just literally lobs on the front. That one comes on, goes on the end, then you got the front end. Okay, and then again, if you're looking at this rear section, you can probably see the similarities between this one and this one. You can see they're basically exactly the same. Okay, so that is the thing with it, with the reason a lot of people are saying that the Iwata airbrushes are exactly the same. Okay, so we just pop that in, tighten up the collet on the back, check your trigger pull, that's all nice and good. Move that out of the way, seat this back in, making sure it all lines up right the way through, and then screw forward, and you're good to go. You don't need to over tighten this, don't go in there too tight or anything else, because what you can do is cause pressure and push the needle physically through the nozzle. Okay, so just make sure everything is off and loose before you put in all that back in, and you're good to go. One little thing I just wanted to check, if we can adjust in here. It looks like we don't, or maybe we do, I don't know. There could be a fine adjustment in there, so what you can actually do is put a tool in there, twist it, and you can tighten up to make the trigger pull a little bit more spiky on the top and a little bit more compressed, and good to go. So let's just grab some air and have a listen to it. Okay, so I've got a little macro valve on the back end here. This just clips in like that. Okay. And it sounds like all we have is on-off for air, so we don't have any travel on the air, which surprises me because I thought we would. So obviously what we're talking about here is, if I turn up the air pressure so you can hear it, is that it doesn't matter how much I pull the trigger, it's all the same. You can probably hear. And what I mean by that is when you take something like the Iwata, you can probably hear little, the more I push down, the more air you get. So you start at the top and then we can increase as we push down. So it looks like we don't have that feature, so it's just an on-off for the air. Maybe a little bit if you're very, very gentle with your air, but it's not a lot of room in there. But this is where this comes in. So if we do this up, you can hear. So this is trigger down, turning this, little amount of air as we increase. So you can actually dial in what air you want. Now this is what I have on here. Okay, so it actually gets or negates the use of this completely, of a Mac valve. And also, just for disparity, this is a Mac valve built into a Infinity. Okay, so we twist this on the bottom for adjusting the air as well. So by having it at the front, it is a lot easier to deal with. Okay, again, I do like this setup because you can literally just Find your sweet spot just like this. So you're not messing around down in here with your hand trying to do it either. The other thing I don't like about the Mac valve being in the hand, sometimes you can knock it as you're holding it in your hand. So you're holding it in your hand, you think it's great, and then you do this, and then all of a sudden what you don't realise is you've actually come in and you've gone, knocked it and gone, and then you're all over the place. And you're like, oh, right, okay, hold on, turn this down. So I'm not a massive fan of having the Mac valve on here. I do prefer it on the body, but the thing is that particular unit costs a fortune for each one. And you need it with each other airbrush. So I have to say that's very, very nice indeed. So what we're going to do now, I'm going to clear a little bit of space. We're going to put some paint through it. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to put some acrylics through it, because let's face it, I could stick MRP paints through it and have no problem at all. I've got Tamiya lacquer thinners up there, we'd have no problem with those at all. So what I'm thinking is that if we put some acrylics through it, that's the worst case scenario. So we've got some Tamiya. Okay, so good old shake in there. And then all we're going to do is just do a quick paint mix. So I'm just going to put some paint in there. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take some self-leveling lacquer thinners, to be honest, and the reason for doing that is that's all I actually use. Okay, I don't tend to use any other thinners at all, I like it. So what I'm going to do twofold, we're going to do a nice thick mix just to see what's going on. And then we're going to do a thin mix. So ratio wise, I have no idea. As I say, watch my videos and I'll teach you all about air pressures and listening to it. So that's why we start this way. Okay, so colour cup off. So to start with, this airbrush has never been fired in anger. So what I'm going to just do is put a little bit of thinners in here. Not tons of it, just a couple of mil. So we're just making sure it is all running okay. Alright, so we're just going to come along. So what we're looking for, carefully pulling the trigger, so we've had the nozzle off. If we get bubbles in here, we've got a looseness at the front, we've got air getting back. And I'm just going full tilt, pulling the trigger, blasting through, so we're just seeing how it works and how it performs. So what we're going to do is dial down that all-important air pressure to what I think would be about right. Okay, so then we're going to come in with our paint and we're going to pop that in the colour cup. I'm going to pop the lid on purely because I don't want it coming back at me if it goes horrendously wrong. Okay, as always, check our flow. Seems nice. Okay, and then down on here, unless you think I would have done this a little bit before. Okay, we're just going to come in, we're going to check our flow. So this is just styrene sheet, not been primed or anything else, straight down onto plastic. And again, we can go very tight. And then if we just increase that, that has nice control. Again, this is one of those things, it is personal choice, totally personal. It feels quite big in the hand, if I'm honest. It feels like I'm a long way from down here. But that's probably because I'm used to using these, and I think you've got the travel distance you might be able to see on the overhead. It just feels like it's a long way away from me. But generally, I have to say, it's got very nice control. And you think, we've just gone in there with a standard mix and not known, and we've not had to adjust it at all. So let's just try and do some colouring. So I have to say, the trigger action is beautiful. It's got a very nice, positive feel for it. You can see exactly what we're doing here. You don't have any problems. It's got good coverage. It's got a beautiful spray pattern as well. Okay, and then if we just try and let's go down in here. Let's do some tiny work. See how we get on. So I haven't adjusted anything. So we're just trying to find the sweet spot. There it is. And I have to say that is very, very nice. Doing the old squiggles and things. Okay, back up. Really nice. Okay, let's try this on full chat. Okay, so full pull. Good. Coverage. Okay, just pressing down for air. Just to dry that back. Again, it's probably, I don't know if you can see it on my finger, I don't know if I'm a fan of the actual trigger top, because I think it's because it's longer, I'm trying to almost pull it back in my hand. Again, it really is personal. Once you've got used to it, right, but the trigger, I must admit, I'm not finding very comfortable. I don't know why, but again, it's what you're used to. That's literally just a personal thought of mine. And I can't take that away from the airbrush because it's no problem at all. Okay, let's rethin this just a little bit more. Okay, just going to go into this nice and thin, just see if we can do some shading and blending. So again, let's mix in the colour. That's probably more like what you'd be spraying. That was very thick paint, to be honest. Okay. So, off angle. Okay, let's take this over here. And again, you can move in nice and tight and get pretty much anything you would want. Very good for shading work. And actually now I'm sort of getting more used to it. I'm slightly putting less pressure down on the trigger. And again, that's personal choice of how I have my airbrush set up. I can actually say this is really very, very nice indeed. It's also, the thing is, sometimes I often describe airbrushing as like looking down a gun sight. It's that thing of having the confidence of when you go like this, of knowing where the paint's going to come out. One of the little things I do with the guys that obviously come here doing airbrushing courses and various things, we do sort of the noughts and crosses. So literally we go like this, and then you're just trying to follow exactly where you were the first time. Okay, and then we come in like this, and it's having that confidence of knowing where your paint is going to go. Okay, so you can do that, and then obviously we can just, okay, and it is having that, you know, ability for all times of knowing where your airbrush is going to go. And that is a thing to it. So at the end of the day, it's confidence. If you're confident in your airbrush and you're confident about the spray pack it's going to give, that when you pull the trigger you're not going to get any surprises or anything else like that, that improves your airbrushing 1,000,000%. And having a nice airbrush that can do that is something else. And I'll be honest with you, this is the first time I've sprayed this airbrush. I haven't touched it before or anything else like that. And I have to say, I think I'm in love with it. And especially when you're talking the price. So this particular airbrush, I have to say, did come from HM Hobbies. Merrick sent me this one to have a play with, just to have a feel for it. I've had members badgering me now for absolute ages about this particular airbrush, about have a go with it. I know some of the guys on the forum have reported back to me already that they love it. I'm always very skeptical when you're talking about an airbrush of this price, because this price, I'm looking at it right now on HM Hobbies and it's £119.99. For that money, seriously, I think you'd be a fool not to. If you're looking for that sort of, you know, mid-range and a little bit, you know, just over 100 quid, then this absolutely is a beautiful thing. But this Mac valve on the front is great, because you could do some serious work with this thing on full chat. You know, if you're doing a big model or something else, then you're there, okay? But if you want to do something, you know, a little bit more refined, you know, and you just want to come in and do something small in little tight areas, then, you know, you can do all those tiny little details and all that little painting literally with this airbrush, you know, with no fear whatsoever. And that is the nice thing with it, that you can do the smallest of details, and if you want to chuck down big coats of paint. So if you want an airbrush that does a little bit of everything, 120 quid. I am so impressed. I am seriously very impressed with this. I could see this actually turning into my daily driver. Also now, after using this thing for a few minutes, I'm getting used to the length of it, because it is definitely longer than what I'm used to, okay? But also, having the Mac valve, having the pressure, everything, yeah, it's very, very nice. And I have to say, you know, like I've always said, I love the iWater. My favourite airbrush is that particular one here, which is my, which one it is now, which is my HP CS. It's a lovely piece of kit. It's beautiful, it's very gentle, you can do some very nice fine details with it. It's not as clunky, shall we say, as the Harder and Steenbeck, but this could be something else. This is literally, I would describe this as a 250 quid airbrush. If someone put this in my hand and said, how much would you pay for it? I would seriously be saying this is probably what I would call a high-end airbrush. It's probably going to be around about the sort of £250 mark. And certainly I wouldn't be thinking it is literally just over 100 quid, because it is very, very nice. And it is one of those airbrushes where we're spraying here technically, as I would say, acrylics through it, but I'm doing work like I'd be using MRPs, for instance, and a lacquer-based paint, or if we were using Tamiya lacquers, because I have that confidence in it that it's not going to block, and doing the smaller little detailed stuff and stuff like that. It is absolutely beautiful. And again, it just doesn't seem to stop. It's beautiful, good control all the way through. So I have to say, the guys are right. It is a very, very nice airbrush. I have to say, I highly recommend it. So if you are into, you know, you just want to take that next step, because we've all got them, you know, because obviously I still think the Neo, which obviously we know isn't Iwata, it's made for Iwata, is beautiful. I've also got down in here for starting out airbrushes, we've got the Ultra. The Ultra is a great little airbrush to start off with and get going with, because it's got everything you need. It's double action and all those things like that. But if you just want to go that little bit more and pay for something a little bit more, honestly, I think you could go wrong with this type of airbrush. I can say it's going to give hours and hours. The design, the quality, the materials used in it aren't cheap. It's not like, as I say, the cheaper line of airbrushes like the Neo and stuff like that. This one's got a certain heft to it, some certain weight to it. It's pretty much all there. So really all you're going to need is a quick release valve, stick it onto your system, and you're good to go. But yeah, really, really very, very nice indeed. As I said, they do other ones. I've got the details just in front of me. So really what you're looking at is, where are we? There we go. Okay, so you've got the top of the range one, which comes with a 0.18mm nozzle, which is £260. To be honest, looking at it, it doesn't look like a massive difference. I can't imagine where the extra technically money is. They do a base one we're saying around about, which is 100 quid, and there's a couple of others down in there. You've got one which actually comes with a 0.3, which might be an option for you, and there's another one down in there which I can't see what the difference is with that. It's definitely got a different type body, and that's 109, comes with a 0.3 as well. Okay, so there is different options out there for these particular airbrushes, but you imagine there's still going to be the similar type of thing in there. But really, when you're looking at it, and I'm just looking at another website now trying to get some average prices. For instance, my old daily driver, which was this one, this is technically the same price. It's 120, just make sure we get this correctly. So you're really looking at, as I say, these ones here, I've just found it another place and it's £118, okay, for the one we're looking at today. But you're still in the area of the Evo versus the actual, this Procon one. So when you're looking at both these airbrushes on a side-by-side comparison, it's very easy to be tempted, because not only do we have the end on here, so I know the Silverline version has it as well, but you are paying 135 for that, okay? But also you've got a built-in Mac valve at the front, and that is worth probably another £25 on an airbrush, £30 on an airbrush, something else like that. Okay, so from that point of view, you know, definitely it's got to give it the thumbs up. Just looking down, when we're into other prices, what else could you get for it? If you wanted to, again, it does for what you've got on there. Very thing. Obviously, the Harder-in Steenbeck, your other option on that one, if you were looking at it, would be to go for the FPC2 in one. That one, obviously, you get the little Mac valve down in here, which I'm not a fan of because it doesn't go off to 0. It's 20 to 100%, not 0 to 100%. Okay, and obviously you do get the ring on the back, but you're paying again another £30 for that option. So you could do like that, and that's really about it. Again, if you're up into the Harder-in Steenbeck CFs, you know, these ones here, you're looking around about the £165, £175 for these particular airbrushes. So, you know, again, it's right there. It's there in the money. It fills a very, very nice gap. So yeah, I have to say, I am suitably impressed. I'm looking around just to see other options, and I really can't see one. Not for this type of quality and the options. To have the actual trigger pull amount you can dial in and a Mac valve on this system, you're looking really anything between 150 to £200 for this type of airbrush, so it's well under there. So if you ever thought about it, seriously, that's where I'd go. I put my money in that pot, and definitely could see it as being a daily driver for all your airbrushing needs. It's working well with acrylics. I guarantee it's going to work even better for lacquers, so forth and so on. So there we go. That is the Procon Boy FWA Double Action Platinum O2 airbrush.